Yeah, culture change is hard, right? We're trying to, they're the sticky issues that we haven't been able to solve yet, in the 30 years that NAWIC's been operating, in the many, many centuries that we've been constructing things. We need to call men into this with us, not have them thinking that it's an us and a them. NAWIC is at a really critical juncture right now.
Yeah, is it that women don't want to, or is it that you don't think they want to, or that they don't feel like they can?
There is that saying that you can't be what you can't see, but we also have women who have come before us and done amazing things right across the sector. So I actually heard a saying recently that you can't be what you can't imagine.
Welcome to NAWIC Couch. Would you like to introduce yourself to us?
Thanks, Rachael. So Cathryn Greville, I'm the CEO of NAWIC. My background, I'm a sustainability and social impact leader in the areas of equity, diversity and inclusion, and I guess the people side of sustainability. And also law. So I'm a lawyer and a former legal counsel and court advocate and a qualified director. So in terms of my background, I guess really I'm a change maker at heart. So I really want to build impact and build better environments. And I think that's probably led me to roles where I can have impact both within an organisation, but also further than that in the sector and also in the community. And there's no better sector to drive change in than construction and the built environment sector. We literally build the places where people work, live and play. And in terms of equity, diversity and inclusion work, there's no better sector to actually have the opportunity to do that because, as you know, there's lots of challenges and lots of opportunity to make things better for everyone. So I think that's where I've been driven to NAWIC, because for NAWIC, for me, is really that opportunity to connect people and ideas and elements to actually drive gender equity and sustainable change for the built environment sector. And that really excites me. And I think NAWIC is at a really critical juncture right now. So it is an exciting time, and I know we'll get into this. Our 30th anniversary year is incredible. And we do really need to be increasing our reach and increasing our impact. So that is both with men, for example. So we're trying to increase our membership with men, currently sitting at about 11%. We need to see that much higher. We've got almost 88% majority of the sector, obviously, are males. So we really need to be calling men in and working with them to drive the change that we need to see. And also establishing NAWIC as a real agent in terms of the culture change agenda. Yep. An organisation that is really able to articulate and shift the dial for women and for everybody.
I would love to do a traditional NAWIC Couch episode with you that sort of unpacks a bit more of your story and experiences. So perhaps we'll table that for season 3. But what I would like to do with you today is something a little bit different. And I'd like to reflect on some of the themes raised by our guests during season 1 and 2 of NAWIC Couch and explore sort of how NAWIC's organisational strategies and mission and the work that's happening across the board is addressing some of these things raised. So I'm sort of putting a lot of questions back to you today. I hope that's okay.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to start with one of our priority areas, which is women's participation in the industry. So there's so much to this, but I'd just like to explore a few different perspectives to start with. So Chloe from season 1 touches on a really common barrier, simply not seeing women represented in the industry and therefore not considering a pathway. So we'll just hear some of her words and then I might ask you a question about that.
I used to joke at school saying that I'm going to be a tradie. I guess I just never, because I never knew any other females or other women in the industry, I never thought about doing it.
So I feel like this really affects a lot of people. And I think the first question that would perhaps typically be asked after hearing something like what Chloe has said is, what role does visibility and representation play in encouraging people to come into construction? And I think Chloe sort of touched on that. She didn't know anyone, so she didn't think about it. So instead, I'd like to ask you is, how can NAWIC and its members help young women see themselves in roles earlier?
Great question. I think visibility is, as you've touched on, visibility is really critical. There is that saying that you can't be what you can't see. But we also have women who have come before us and done amazing things right across the sector. So I actually heard a saying recently that you can't be what you can't imagine.
I like that so much.
And I
better.
like that better.
Yep.
Because I think, and I want women to, and girls as they're coming through school and into their careers, to be able to imagine big and really, set their sights high, and for construction and the built environment sector to be part of that opportunity for them. So I think, yes, we need to have visible role models, but I would actually bring this back to the obligation on the sector, because there's another element of this of if girls can't see or women can't see themselves in the sector, actually, what are we doing as a sector that is driving girls and women away? So we need to have some accountability as a sector and actually look at what are the environments that we are expecting girls and women to want to aspire to or want to come into. And are those environments actually ones in which people see that they can succeed? And I think we have to be honest about where we're at as a sector. We're 12.4% women across the sector nationally, 3.4% in trades. Not surprised that that people don't see themselves necessarily in a trade. And then we've got other issues that women are facing when they do come into the sector. So microaggressions, for example, there's sexual harassment and general harassment and bias and discrimination is rife. We've got, experiences that are far from what you would expect, that are safe and inclusive. And then we've also got some practical issues around managing women's health and managing parental leave and return to work, and making sure that actually this is a sector where not only do you see yourself doing the roles that are available, and there's a lot of opportunity to actually spread the word about the amazing roles that are available, and they're so different. It's such a diverse industry. There's so much opportunity. But also, if you come in and you do those roles, you want to do those roles, what is the experience going to be for you as you travel along in your career? And is that going to be practical if you have, plans for certain things in your life? So
I love the reframing of the you can't be what you can't see, because I've always struggled with that saying, and it has been used quite a lot amongst the industry and NAWIC and things like that over the past few years. And I would sit there, and I'm quite a literal person, and I go, but I am something that I didn't see. So you can be, because I did it. The person sitting next to me did it. The person on the table over there did it too. So what do we actually mean? But I think that imagination part of it and being able to aspire is really actually getting to the point of what perhaps people mean when they say that, which is you can be whatever you want, even if you can't see it, but can you imagine yourself in that role? Because if you can't, you probably wouldn't think to go there. And there was a few other things that you mentioned there in your answer about Chloe's clip, which we'll go into in a bit more detail as well. So I think that will lead us into Angel's quote, which highlights sort of another layer of that stereotypes and misinformation that discourage women, particularly those from migrant backgrounds in Angel's case, before they even get a chance to try it. So I'll play that one, and then perhaps we could go a bit deeper on that particular point as well.
A lot of people don't know. A lot of people in my community don't know. A lot of immigrants don't know, right? When they come in, people scare them. And they're like, oh, it's so hard for women in construction. Oh, it's so hard for immigrants to get good jobs. No, you have to be this, you have to be that. And they don't have any kind of representation.
So with that, how do you feel like we can break down misconceptions about what women can and can't do in construction, and what role can NAWIC play in creating more accessible pathways for people in diverse communities?
Look, there's a number of things. I think firstly, it's sharing the success stories.
Yep.
When you speak to and you look at the story of people like Angel, she's amazing, right? And we have so many amazing women from migrant backgrounds in our sector. So let's share the success stories. Let's actually, let people know how much talent we've got in the sector already. And then that creates a ripple effect for other people to see themselves in that story and actually imagine that might be a role for them. So we have, last year we had almost 800 nominees for our awards around the country and 88 award winners. There's a really good place to start. Right. So we just have so much talent, so many people doing amazing things in the sector, and we really need to shine a light on that. And that's why I'm so excited. We've got the South Australian Awards tonight. I'm so excited it is such a buzz to be in a room where you literally are able to recognise and celebrate the hard work and also the achievements and the talent we've got. And when people say to me, oh, but construction or that area of construction is not an area that women, want to do. My answer is bollocks. We have loads of women who want to come into the sector and are. We need to actually look at what we're doing to open up the door to create more opportunity for that.
Yeah, is it that women don't want to, or is it that you don't think they want to, or that they don't feel like they can? Because they're actually not the same thing.
And they're three different elements of it, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they did for the Victorian all-women boring crew, for the tunnel boring project, they opened up 12 places, made it very clear that they were 12 places for women. Yeah. You didn't have to have experience in construction. Come along, we will train you. They got over 800 applicants. Yes. So you can't say, and that's for a tunnelling crew, underground, that's really like, when people think of construction, they think of dirty work and out, in the boots and the hard hat.
That's quintessential.
That is it, right?
Yes.
800 women, who come from backgrounds. Some of them had construction experience. Many of them didn't. They came from teaching backgrounds, and, some of them were professions and had office jobs, and some were hairdressers. Such a diversity of backgrounds can be attracted to construction and what it offers. So I think we need to flip the script and make sure we're telling the story of actually look at all this talent. And when we come back to the amount of migrant talent we have, we are just missing out as a sector if we are not looking outside of people who have only Australian experience, for example. It can be really hard to get a break in a new country. I've been there. It's if your experience isn't local, but that's just, I think, an issue around recognising what the equivalent experience is, and also looking at transferable skills. We need to bring people in from other sectors. Why are we hiring people that look and sound like us and have the same backgrounds as us, when actually we need problem solvers, we need innovative thinking, we need more productive workplaces. As a country in construction, productivity's gone down 0.2% every year since 1989, 1990. So we need a different way of doing things, a different way of thinking. If you come from different countries, different backgrounds, you're brought up differently, that just gives such depth and richness to our workplaces. And, I can't explain enough just how important that is to actually solve the problems that we've got.
I can see your passion about that. And I think it's interesting because I refuse to believe, and I'm happy to be told otherwise, that there's not enough room for everyone. I feel like there can be a bit of they're taking my job or my mate's job or whatever. We are on the cusp of a boom in construction, in mining and related industries in Australia, with the Olympics, the major infrastructure happening in South. The tunnel's out there, out the door. That's where that's happening, and what's happening in defence and all of those kind of things as well. There is so much work and not enough people to deliver it. So someone is not going to take your job. They're just not going to. But if you let them in and learn from their experience and draw on that wisdom, you're going to have a more successful team. That I'm sure of.
Well, we need something like, 400,000 more people in construction. That was last year's figures. So it's not a case, construction is not one of those areas where you should be worried about someone taking your job. We need talent. We don't have enough people. Yep. We don't have the right skills. So where we draw that from, we really have to open up the talent pool. And if you're missing out on a whole category of people, multiple categories of people, because you've got this idea of what the person in that job looks like, then, you're missing the point.
Yeah, gatekeeping the door makes no sense, because then once you're inside, you look around and go, I can't build this by myself. It's like, but you didn't let anyone in to help you. So what would you like to do with that?
It is such a crazy thing in construction that we still have to, what we really do need to do is train hiring managers and those involved in recruiting in construction about transferable skills and just the, what they're missing out on, because construction is still one of those industries that recruits largely through word of mouth. Yeah. And that blows my mind, in 2025, because when you think about the number of people and the sheer talent that you're missing out on by not going publicly and opening up your recruitment pool, it's just not a smart business decision.
No, it's not. And I think perhaps towns, quote unquote, like Adelaide, can be particularly guilty of that kind of way of thinking, and just trying to challenge how we broaden the way that we approach that and still maintain the sort of products and teams that we're trying to look for both can be true. It's just perhaps not how we're used to thinking about it.
Yeah.
I'd like to move on to a clip from the Daisy and Ali episode, and it weaves in quite well with what we were just talking about, because Ali herself called, I think she mentioned in her episode, about 100 people just looking for an apprenticeship. So just trying to get in the door that way, and even that was quite challenging. But I've pulled from that episode what I'd like to talk about is what happens once women do enter the industry and how we support them in that way.
They get taken in and do 4 years of an apprenticeship and don't learn anything because they're never put in front of the things that they need to learn. They get all the little, piddly stuff, the easy stuff, and then 4 years and they can't find a job after because no one gave them a real shot.
Yeah. So that's the part I want to talk about. In particular, how can we hold companies accountable for the quality of training they're delivering and the support that they're providing to these women once we do get them into the industry?
Well, that's a huge concern to me from a training perspective. The training providers and the employers that are taking on apprentices have to be accountable for the quality of training they're providing. You've got someone there for a 4-year apprenticeship. You need to train them to be what they need to be in the sector, and you've got such an opportunity to do that, right? So firstly, it's discriminatory not to be giving women the same opportunities as men in the sector. Secondly, you're doing yourself a disservice for your business, but also for the sector, in that if you have people coming out at the end that don't have the level of experience that they should have at the end of an apprenticeship. I mean, that is just absolutely crazy. So there's accountability on both the training providers, and I think this is a real area of need and support, and certainly something that NAWIC is focused on in all of our jurisdictions around the country. That support, that networking, that education, the creating a community for women as they're coming into the sector is really important. And I love to see that we're building our trade initiatives in especially in South Australia, but all around the country, because that is such an important part of coming in and making you feel like you belong. And if you are the only apprentice who's a woman in your business, actually having connection to others outside of that you might not otherwise have met.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't come from a trades background, but I found NAWIC because I was looking for that community, but I didn't feel connected in the ways that you feel connected when there's people who you can talk to about things that perhaps if you haven't experienced it, you wouldn't understand. So going to events and the networking and creating that community is so, so important. And I'm not sure unless you've done it, you quite understand how important it is. Or if you haven't benefited from it looking inwards, you just sort of brush it off as a silly little, group of people coming together to talk about stuff, but it really matters.
It does matter. I mean, I started my career in law, and I very quickly found my Women Lawyers organisation in my state, and I ended up jumping on the committee and going on to volunteer for many years with it. But it was just so important because I was practicing in a way, I really felt connected to the purpose of legal practice and the impact that you could have. And in commercial firms at the time wasn't necessarily people of the same, looking for the same thing. And law, for example, is hard. So I found that community of women in my profession and saw the benefit of that. And then through the years as I've come in and worked in construction, I've seen NAWIC as this connector piece, almost for our membership base is so broad. We've got professions, we've got trades, we've got people across all different market segments of construction. And when I say construction, I actually mean the built environment, right from, utilities. I was just speaking with a member at the utilities company yesterday, right through to manufacturing and transport and, road and rail. It's all part of what we do. It connects into the construction sector, and I would say built environment more broadly. And the opportunity to bring people together, not only that have similar backgrounds and are facing similar experiences based on the role that they do, their profession, their trade, but also to connect people across professions and trades and different roles is enormous. Yep. And I think this is such growth opportunity for women who come in, but also, this is a big shout out, we want more men in our membership, right? We want this to be the whole sector working together to drive the environments that we actually want to see. That's such a focus for NAWIC is this is, I guess the answer to it is culture change in a way that creates environments where everybody can thrive. And that's not women's business, because the issues are not women's issues to fix. They're everybody's issues to fix. It's the whole sector, it's society, and we need to be joining forces. So there is that network and that support for women, but there's also that great learning opportunity and the networking and the support for men as well to come with us on this journey and join forces and really drive this together. And they get so much out of it. Our males who mentor just, they come out and often they'll say, I wasn't expecting this. I thought I was giving something.
Yeah.
I didn't expect how much I would receive in doing this. And
do you think that with Ali's experience of not getting the right training and support, is there malicious intent, or do you think it's a lack of education or something else?
I think rarely is it malicious intent. I think there's definitely lack of awareness. What we find, so we run a male allyship program and we put men through that, and it is quite transformative for many men who come through that program, because unless you've sort of, walked in someone else's shoes, so to speak, or thought about what it would be like in someone else's shoes, you can be blissfully unaware of the experience of others. Yeah. And I think many men in our sector are just unaware of what the experiences of women are, and being able to actually learn and hear from women and actually see the impact on them is transformative. Yeah. So a lot of it is around awareness. I think there is also a need to make sure that everyone understands the law, and this is men and women and non-binary people, the whole sector, because a lot of the types of behaviour that might lead to, discrimination might actually lead to, is unlawful. Well, discrimination is unlawful. Yes. A lot of what you're talking about and the experiences of our apprentices and others in the sector is it shouldn't be happening. There are laws and protections. People need to know what they are, and they need to know what their rights are. And they need to be comfortable to both raise those but also to support others in raising those, because we can't always put the expectation on the person experiencing that conduct to be the one to be raising it. We really need to, I say, we want to create this collaboration of upstanders to actually drive the culture forward, on the ground every day. This is the sort of culture change we're talking about. And you can be that person of support and that culture ambassador for other people in your organisation and across the sector. So
I find it so interesting to watch those conversations play out in real time sometimes. If there's behaviour being called out, or even something online that's sort of alluding to some of these, or quite clearly pointing out some of these issues, and the reactions of people who go, well, I didn't mean it like that, or I didn't do it like that. And it's trying to communicate in such a way, and not that I want to put this burden back on women, like I would like to put it on men who are in leadership positions as well, of how can we land the message of this is a problem and the behaviour is a problem. We're not saying you're bad, but you can do better in this way, without, because I think that's where sometimes it becomes a bit unstuck in terms of having the conversation and calling out behaviour, is people take it like they're a bad person, when that's not the intention a lot of the time, and how that communication can actually become constructive. I think that's quite challenging for a lot of people.
There's a big education piece around what discrimination, what the law actually requires, because the law doesn't look at your intent.
Yes.
So if you discriminate against someone, the law is not looking, did you mean to do that or not? We're looking at it from the experience of the person who's been harassed or discriminated against and what that impact has had on them. So it's trying to shift people out of this mindset of, but this is what I have in my head. I didn't mean it, so therefore it must be okay. Yes. And actually, if we shift away from that and focus on, well, what is the impact on the person who's at the receiving end of it? Yeah. That is the crux of where we're looking. That is what the law actually looks like, and what is the experience of people. And if we can get people starting to understand both their duties, and of course there is positive duty on employers to be creating safe workplaces, but also that flows to individuals. There's obligations on everyone in the workplace to actually uphold, a standard of conduct and actually fair and inclusive environments. Then we're going to shift the culture way forward. It's less about me, more about the others, and what is And I may not mean that, but if I'm having that impact on someone else, I need to focus on what I care about that person's experience. So therefore, I'm going to change what I'm doing, not necessarily because I think it's wrong even, but if it's having a poor impact on someone else, then it's not effective. It's not constructive. I can change that.
I've had some interesting discussions with people, I'm sure you have too, where I've kind of said in so many words, your intention doesn't matter to me. And they go, and I said, no, it's actually the outcome that I'm focused on. I'm not suggesting, and I've maybe just use a safety and construction example instead of, but the metaphor applies, is I'm sure you didn't intend to leave a hole in the wall that something fell through and knocked someone on the head. I'm actually 100% sure that wasn't your intention, but that's what happened. That is the outcome, and that is a problem. So let's talk about the steps that happened that got us there, and how do we change the behavior for next time? And it can be applied to the same thing in terms of discrimination and what the law says. It's like, your intention doesn't matter because I'm trying to communicate the outcome that you sort of enacted because of your choice. Exactly. It's not about you or what you think, and I don't think you're a bad person, but I do think this thing that happened was bad for these reasons, about impact, not intention.
Absolutely. And back to your question around, do you think it's malicious intent? I don't think so. I genuinely start with the point of view that most people are good and they don't intend to behave in a bad way. It's just everyone is at a different level of awareness, and probably, this is a bit of a journey. Socially, it's a journey. People don't necessarily understand the impact of lots of different behaviours on minoritized groups. So we need to educate, but we also need to call people in. And so that first stage of actually getting people in, the way that we do that is really important. We need to call men into this with us, not have them thinking that it's an us and a them.
Yeah, I mean, on the record, personally, my belief is malicious intent is probably 0.01% of the time. And everything else is about just acknowledging that you've got some things to learn and some places to go. And we all do. And that's actually fine. Like, don't have to get your back up about that. You just need to have a growth mindset, if you will.
Growth mindset, I was going to say, continuous improvement if you're a business, growth mindset if you're an individual. Absolutely.
Even growth mindset for companies, I feel like it would apply.
Absolutely.
I'm tangenting, so I'm going to bring us back on track. So Kiara, in her episode, raised a really important point about policy and decisions, and they're often made about women in construction without actually speaking to the women in construction.
I find it really frustrating when government and policymakers make decisions on behalf of people in the industries, particularly like myself as a female Aboriginal business owner. It has been very rare and few and far between has someone actually had a conversation with me about where I see a women in construction policy actually benefiting this state.
So I think there's a lot in that little snip. And I think there's a discussion around policy and the role that it plays and NAWIC's position on that and how those two things interact to move things forward. So I'm interested to hear your perspective on that.
So on the policy side, if I can put my hat on as a former sort of regulator and government servant, that stakeholder engagement to actually understand the needs of the people that you're creating law and policy for is critical. And yes, I absolutely agree that there is room for improvement in different, not using government as one monolith, but in different sectors and different policymakers around that and different, depending on which state or whether you're looking federal as well. So that engagement with your stakeholders, and coming from background in law reform, the first point that you go to is actually think about what the intention is, what the outcome is that you're trying to put into place, and who are you actually regulating for, and how are you going to do that? And you can't do that unless you have insights from people who are on the ground who are actually living it. That's my personal view. I can't say that that's how policy is made around the country, but that's certainly where I think we could do better. From NAWIC's point of view, we're in this really unique position. So we have close to 17,000 members around the country. We have close to 400 volunteers that spend their time and energy doing the work that NAWIC does to make the sector better for women and to support women. And we've got boots on the ground in every state and territory in the country. And that means we've got an ear to the ground of what the experience is for women in all of those jurisdictions. And that makes us really unique. So we build off that. We draw from that because that intel actually provides us with what we need to know in terms of what are we going to advocate for, what are the issues that actually need solving, and then what's the impact and what's the experience for the people on the ground in that space. So we do a lot of advocacy. Some of it is public, some of it's behind the scenes.
Can I ask, while you're on that train, why? Like, what is important about advocacy and policy? Why is that something that we want to use the information gathered from the people on the ground, ears to the ground, to push forward? Like, what's the point?
Well, at its most simple, we need law and policy that meets the needs of the community. And to meet the needs of the community, you need to understand what those needs are. Yep. Women are obviously a very big part of our community, and we need to be making laws and policies that actually are effective. And therefore, you need to speak to the community that you're talking to. We, from an advocacy point of view, NAWIC, we have this incredible opportunity to drive where policy and law goes. So what is the policy framework around procurement, for example? We've seen some great developments in certain jurisdictions. Other jurisdictions don't have procurement policy, and that's an area that we're ramping up advocacy
South Australia, you're embarrassing me.
So there's a lot we can do because we know, for example, that procurement, where you spend your money, has an enormous role to play in driving forward social impact and equity. So that's one area of focus. Obviously, we do a lot of advocacy around the work health and safety aspects, and we've just started our ending sexual harassment and gender-based violence campaign, starting that in Safe Work Month this month, and that will continue for several months because we have to be advocating. We have to be putting forward the positions that we know is what women need, and we need to be creating safety and inclusion, across the board. So such a critical role of where NAWIC is and where we want to be. So, yeah.
I think as a just personal anecdote, I used to have a real gripe, I suppose, the right way to phrase it, with the idea of quotas and putting it in legislation and trying to adhere to that. I think early in my career, I had this quite strong opinion that it was, no, I'll just get it because I'm the best person for the job and I don't want to be a quota because then people will think that I'm only here because of the quota. And I had a real internal struggle coming to terms with the benefit of it. I think what I've come to learn is things don't happen unless they're enforced sometimes. So to be able to have the mechanisms that are there, it forces some change to happen, and there might be some teething issues and people like 20-year-old Rachael who had those sort of opinions, but you realise that once it gets in and people start seeing the benefit, they go, oh, yeah, okay. And the quotas kind of become second nature to the fact that you've forced the culture change in a way. Does that resonate what I'm saying?
Absolutely. It's a driver. So law and policy reform is one of the tools at our disposal to create the workplaces that we need and create environments and safe environments for people. So absolutely, when we talk about targets, and it's interesting, if you speak to some businesses, they will say, actually, I'm not going to look at that unless it's a requirement because, we're in construction, we're busy people, there's projects we've got to manage, we're trying to manage lots of people, lots of moving parts. It's complex in some of the areas that we operate. So don't give me another thing that I have to look at unless I really have to look at it. So in some ways, we've got businesses that are saying, if you make it a priority, we will make it a priority. Some don't say that, but we know that that's the case.
If I have to, I guess I have to.
Absolutely. And that's where, and we've got other mechanisms. We've got, so procurement's one area, getting it into tendering and into contracting is a really good opportunity. That's where, you can look at this from which part of this is led by government, what is government's duty, and what is industry's duty.
Yes.
And we have to look at all of those and use them as different levers all at the same time to actually get where we need to go. So I'd love to say that government could just use the stick and that would work. But the reality is, even in regulation, it is tricky. Behaviour change takes what we say a carrot and a stick. So it takes the incentive and the education of why you would do this and why it's important to actually bring someone along the journey. And then, of course, you've got that regulatory stick if someone doesn't then comply. But you have to have gone through that education and opportunity for people to change what they're doing, businesses to change how they're operating, to make it fair, to then be able to regulate and hold people to account. So there's a framework that has to happen and a pattern that has to happen before we get to that stage.
And it adds a bit of leniency is not the right word, perhaps patience, in terms of giving people the time to also learn the things that either industry or NAWIC or the government are trying to achieve with the quotas, to get everyone else coming along to that same or similar level of understanding of the why. Because I think this is a case of the intentions do actually really matter, but the end game is what's important. And getting to the end game is a little bit tricky, and there's education there and there's teething and there's misunderstandings. But if you hold steady to where you're trying to go, that's what's worth it.
Yeah, culture change is hard, right? We're trying to, they're the sticky issues that we haven't been able to solve yet, in the 30 years that NAWIC's been operating, in the many, many centuries that we've been constructing things. So it's not easy. And many of the things you've just raised that's part of the journey. It's part of how we go across. But I think also industry needs to see examples of this being done well. So I was just at an event yesterday and one of the people speaking was from B6 WAPPAC, who have just run the tender for the New South Wales government's Brent Street project. And they have a target of 50% women on that project. And talking to them and talking to those who were involved in putting the tender out and the excitement around that, they know that that's a really ambitious target, but they also honestly believe that they're going to put the things in place and be able to achieve it. So, it takes one, it's the first tender that does it, or the first company that puts up their hands and says, actually, this is so critical to how we operate and we believe in it so much that we're going to put our neck on the line, we're going to try this. And, whether they achieve 50% or get close to it, that's a positive step forward. And that actually shows other businesses that this is possible. In fact, nothing is impossible if you actually prioritise it and put the steps in place to achieve it. So construction needs to, we're such an innovative industry in some ways. I mean, we build, skyscrapers and incredible tunnels and bridges and things that stand up for centuries, right? We need to be able to apply some of that, amazing innovation in the technical field to the way we actually run our businesses and the way we think about solving the problems that we have ahead of us. And there's lots of great ways that we can do this. Incremental steps. Start small, but, these are not insurmountable problems. And we really believe, NAWIC is here to support businesses and leaders as they go along that journey. And we know what works. And we know, we've got expertise, and that's where, going back to our volunteer and our membership base, that's why we exist. It drives what we do. And we've got all this intel, and that creates the advocacy that we do. And it makes it a lot stronger when we can go to government and say, this is what we need. We know this because this is what we've done. And we do research around that as well, obviously. So we speak to our members a lot. We've just released our parental leave research, which looked at the experiences of women through pregnancy and parental leave and then returning to work. And so we've got lived experience built into the work that we do. Our microaggressions research, that's all about speaking to people, right? So we know at the heart, we know the core of what the problem is, and we know from there we can draw out the solutions, and we can work with both industry and government and unions to actually drive this. Because, someone once said to me, it's a crisis, not a competition. And I know that's a little bit strange for construction because it's a very competitive, very adversarial sort of sector to work in. But this is one area where we need to collaborate, learn from each other, not reinvent the wheel, share our learnings, and actually move forward as a sector. And that's what excites me, because there is a lot of collaboration happening. We've got projects happening that's doing just this, and it's so exciting to see the impact we can have.
Hard to be the first cab off the rank sometimes. I mean, even with what PAC have done with their tender, it sounds simple, and I'm doing air quotes if you're only listening to this, but that's hard. And putting your neck out and being the first or one of the first companies to sort of try that kind of thing, it is a commercial risk. Construction, famously, doesn't really like commercial risk, and we manage those like down to the dollar a lot of the time. So being able to have industry bodies like NAWIC and like policy and governments and things like that in place to support those sticking your neck out scenarios is what's going to mean that others can follow as well.
And governments drive this too. So the government is the client. They have imagined that this is what we want. And not only are we going to put it in as a nice to have in our tender, we're actually going to put it down as a rateable requirement.
Yep.
So they have prioritised it in the tender process. And I've worked with organisations overseas that have gone through this process and are further along in terms of maturity of building it into how they operate. But what we've seen is you start with the tender process, you might start with nice to have, then it becomes a requirement, then it actually eventually gets built into your contract.
Yep.
And once you've got this as a standard way of operating that's built into your contractual relationships, it then becomes normalised. And then there's that collaboration together around how you do this and the importance of it. And there's such an opportunity for building better through that collaboration. And this is one area that I'm super excited about that project. But it is, it's really, Australian leading, it's nationally leading, it's globally leading as well.
And I think to anyone who perhaps, like me, at some point in time would hear something like that and have those feelings of, or I'm not sure if that sits right, I guess I would just encourage them to sit with it a bit. Talk to some people about it. Come and talk to NAWIC about it. Say, I'm having these feelings, don't know where it's coming from. And it's like, okay, well, there's a bit of conversations about patriarchy or where that makes you feel and what that looks like and how we get there. I think having the feelings is completely normal and fine, but it's then what you do with it and how are we talking about it, and are you acknowledging it and going, well, that feeling must be true because it feels icky to me, or are you going, why does it feel icky to me? A massive company and a lot of organisations are standing behind this. I'd like to sort of unpack that a little bit more and see where I can get to with my thinking on that particular matter.
I like that. And also maybe defining between, is this an individual feeling I'm having as an individual person, or is this a company sort of approach that we're not open to new ways of doing things, or this is going to really challenge our business model? Because they're two, I would say there's two different ways of looking at it, and you're always going to get the individual view, and obviously we're all creatures of the community and the society in which we live. There's a lot of opportunity for positive growth there in terms of how we handle equity and inclusion as a community, but also from a business perspective. You need to, if you're not seeing this as a priority at the moment, this is the way we're moving forward. Government has put it in one project. We just need to see that be successful, and it's coming, right? But also there's that other element for businesses of, you need to actually see, if you don't understand the benefits of diversity in your workforce, and you don't understand how important inclusion is to actually doing good business, you're missing a whole aspect of success, because there's not one metric from a business perspective that you can look at, whether it's productivity, financial materiality, risk management, health and safety. No matter what you look at, people, obviously human resources, how you manage your people, retention, attraction, everything. There's not one metric that isn't good for your business to have an inclusive workplace and make sure that you've got diversity. And we've got all the data that shows us that. There's heaps of reports that research that shows just how important this is for businesses. And that's from a business perspective. And if I put my lawyer hat on for a minute, from a risk perspective, if you're a business and you're a leader of business and you're not thinking about this and thinking about the risk mitigation aspects of it, you're really putting yourself at risk. You're putting your directors and your board at risk. You're putting your management at risk. You're putting the company at risk, because there's such a connection between how things are happening, how people are interacting in your workplace environment, to the risks that you could be facing as a business. And, you know, that and that's not even touching on skills and making sure you have the right people and the right number of them and all of that. So yeah, there's so many elements that businesses need to understand just how important this is.
This conversation was recorded and produced on Kaurna land. We pay our respects to the traditional owners of this land and waterways, as well as the elders, past, present, and emerging. We extend this respect to all Indigenous peoples of this continent and its adjacent lands, recognising their cultures as the oldest continuous living cultures in human history. We recognise the deep spiritual connections and relationship Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have with community, as well as the lands, oceans, waterways, air and sky. We acknowledge the land we live, work and play on always was and always will be Aboriginal land.